A gate agent's sneer of superiority. Two brilliant young women told their tickets are worthless. A decision based on prejudice, wrapped in the guise of corporate policy. This is the story of Maya and Amara Thorne, twin sisters who were publicly humiliated and refused entry onto a flight they had every right to board. But the gate agent, Brenda Jenkins, made a catastrophic miscalculation. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She didn't know that in 10 minutes the roar of a private jet engine would be the opening act for a reckoning that would bring a billion-dollar corporation to its knees. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of resilience and justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us share these impactful stories with even more people. Now let's get into it. The air in Terminal 4 of JFK International Airport was a familiar cocktail of controlled chaos. It smelled of lukewarm coffee, jet fuel, and the faint, anxious sweat of 1,000 travelers running on different clocks. For 17-year-old twins Maya and Amara Thorne, it was just another stop in a life that had already spanned more continents than their pristine passports had room for stamps. Dressed in comfortable yet chic travel attire, matching tailored joggers and cashmere sweaters in slate gray and deep navy, they were mirror images of poised elegance. Maya, the elder by 7 minutes, had her intricate braids pulled back into a high ponytail, her focus already on the tablet in her hands, where she was reviewing schematic designs for their presentation. Amara's braids were styled to fall over one shoulder, and she was observing the human ballet around them, her artist's eye cataloging the expressions of joy, frustration, and exhaustion. They were en route to the prestigious Global Youth Innovators Summit in London, a gathering of the brightest young minds on the planet. They weren't just attendees, they were the keynote speakers for the opening ceremony, set to present their revolutionary water purification system that used sonic resonance, a project that had already earned them a Junior Nobel Prize in physics. They approached the Global Wing's Air Priority boarding gate, their first-class tickets and passports held neatly in a leather folio by Amara. The line was short, a mix of seasoned business travelers and wealthy vacationers. Everything was proceeding with the mundane efficiency of modern air travel. At the podium stood a woman whose name tag read Brenda Jenkins. She was a woman in her late 40s, her uniform impeccably starched, her blonde hair pulled into a tight, severe bun that seemed to accentuate the permanent pinch of disapproval on her face. She moved with a brisk, self-important efficiency, scanning tickets and passports with curt nods. Brenda had been with Global Wings for 22 years, a tenure that had slowly curdled her initial enthusiasm into a rigid, resentful adherence to the rulebook, or rather, her interpretation of it. The power she wielded at this gate was, in her mind, the only real power she had in her life. When a well-dressed man in a Brioni suit presented his documents, she gave him a thin, practiced smile. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Davison." When a young couple, giddy with honeymoon excitement, approached, she offered a clipped, "Next." Then it was Maya and Amara's turn. Amara placed their folio on the counter, offering a polite, warm smile. "Good morning. 2 for Flight 88 to Heathrow." Brenda's eyes flicked from Amara's face to Maya's, then down to their documents. The thin smile she'd given Mr. Davison vanished, replaced by a flat, unreadable line. She picked up Maya's passport first, her thumb rubbing over the photo as if trying to remove an imperfection. She opened it, scrutinized the visa page, then the main information page. She held it up to the light, angling it back and forth. "There's a problem here," she said, her voice flat and devoid of any customer service warmth. Maya looked up from her tablet, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "A problem? Is everything all right?" "The laminate on this passport seems irregular," Brenda stated, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on the plastic coating. "And your ticket," she continued, picking it up. "The name here is Thorne, Maya. The signature on your waiver form seems to differ." "Waiver form?" Amara asked, her brow furrowed. "We're 17. We don't require unaccompanied minor forms." She knew the airline's policy by heart. Their father, a stickler for details, had made them memorize it. Global Wings. Air's policy stated that passengers 16 and over were considered adults for the purpose of travel. Brenda's eyes narrowed. It was the look of a person who despised being corrected. It is at the discretion of the gate agent to request supplementary documentation if there is any doubt about the passenger's eligibility to fly. And I have doubts. She was manufacturing a problem, creating a wall of bureaucratic nonsense where none existed. The irregular laminate was a faint shadow from the airport's own scanner. The waiver form was a complete fabrication, but in that moment, Brenda Jenkins was judge, jury, and executioner. The businessman behind them shifted his weight impatiently. "Can we get this moving?" he muttered. Brenda ignored him, her entire focus a laser beam of suspicion on the two girls. "Furthermore," she said, her voice rising slightly, taking on a performative tone for the growing audience. "I'm not comfortable with the validity of these first-class tickets. It's highly unusual for passengers of your profile to be seated in this cabin without a guardian." The implication hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Your profile, young, black, female. The unspoken words were louder than the jet engine roaring to life outside the window. She was suggesting their tickets were fraudulent, that they didn't belong. Maya's posture stiffened. For years, their father, Dr. Marcus Thorne, had coached them for moments like this. "Grace and steel," he would say. "Never let them see you break. Meet their ignorance with intelligence, their hate with dignity, but never, ever let them win." "With all due respect, ma'am," Maya said, her voice calm and even, a stark contrast to the agent's thinly veiled hostility. "Our tickets were purchased by our father. You can verify the payment with the credit card on file. As for our passports, they were issued by the U.S. State Department 3 months ago and have been used for international travel 4 times since without incident. We are traveling to London to speak at the Global Youth Innovators Summit." She was offering facts, logic, verifiable information. But Brenda Jenkins wasn't interested in facts. She was on a power trip, fueled by a prejudice she would deny until her dying breath. "I don't need a life story, young lady," Brenda snapped. "I need to ensure the security and integrity of this flight. And right now I am not satisfied. I am denying you boarding." The words struck with the force of a physical blow. Denied, just like that. The murmur in the line grew louder. A young woman with pink hair a few people back had quietly raised her phone and started recording. Amara felt a hot surge of anger, but she met Maya's eyes and saw the silent reminder. Grace and steel. "On what official grounds are you denying us boarding?" Amara asked, her voice quiet but firm. "Please state the specific airline regulation you are invoking." This was a direct challenge to Brenda's authority, and it was the final straw. Her face hardened into a mask of indignation. "My grounds are that I am the final authority at this gate, and your documentation is unsatisfactory. Now please step aside. You are holding up the boarding process for our legitimate passengers." Legitimate passengers. The insult was deliberate, a final twist of the knife. Humiliated and furious, Maya and Amara had no choice but to step back, the eyes of the entire gate area burning into them. The illusion of a normal travel day had been shattered, replaced by a cold, ugly reality. As they moved away from the podium, a wave of stunned silence rippled through the line, quickly followed by whispers. The pink-haired girl, whose name was Sarah, kept her phone recording, zooming in on Brenda's smug, triumphant expression as she waved the next passenger forward. Maya's hands were trembling slightly, but her face was a mask of composure. Amara, usually the more expressive of the two, felt a knot of cold fury tightening in her stomach. They stood near the expansive window overlooking the tarmac, the very plane they were meant to be on, a massive Boeing 777 with the Global Wings logo emblazoned on its tail, looming like a monument to their humiliation. "What do we do now?" Amara murmured, her voice barely audible over the din. "We follow the protocol," Maya said, her focus absolute. "Escalate. Demand a manager, document everything." She was already typing a summary of the events into the Notes app on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. They approached the customer service desk adjacent to the gate, a sterile counter manned by another Global Wings employee who looked profoundly bored. "We need to speak to the station manager immediately," Maya said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The employee sighed, a theatrical display of inconvenience, and spoke into a walkie-talkie. A few minutes later, a man in a slightly better-fitting suit arrived. His name tag read David Chen, station manager. He had the harried look of a man constantly putting out fires, and his smile was a fragile, non-committal thing. "Good morning, ladies. I understand there was some confusion at the gate," he began, already framing it as a misunderstanding. "There was no confusion," Amara corrected him, her voice steely. "Your gate agent, Miss Jenkins, has refused to allow us to board Flight 88. She made baseless accusations about our passports and tickets and used discriminatory language." David Chen's smile faltered. The word discriminatory was a lit fuse in the airline industry. He glanced over at Gate B24, where Brenda was still presiding over her little kingdom. He knew Brenda. He knew she was a stickler, a difficult employee, but she had seniority. Challenging her was always a headache. "Well, I'm sure that's not how she intended it," he said, defaulting to corporate platitudes. "Brenda is one of our most experienced agents. Let me just see the documents." Amara handed him the folio. He gave the passports and tickets a cursory glance, his eyes not looking for flaws but for a quick way to end this conversation. He saw nothing wrong with them, of course. They were perfect. But admitting that would mean undermining his senior agent in front of a terminal full of passengers. It would mean paperwork, incident reports, and a call from the union representative. It was easier to back his employee. "I see what Brenda was talking about," he said, his voice a masterclass in feigned sincerity. He pointed to the same non-existent flaw on Maya's passport. "This edge here, it's slightly raised. It's consistent with tampering, and while you are technically old enough to travel alone, given the circumstances and the agent's discretion." He was stonewalling them. He was lying to their faces, backing a lie with another lie. He was the corporate wall they were meant to crash against, the smiling, apologetic face of institutional indifference. "That is patently false," Maya said, her voice dropping to a dangerously calm level. "That passport was in a sealed diplomatic envelope until we arrived at the airport. You and I both know it is perfectly fine. You are choosing to uphold a decision based on prejudice." Chen's face flushed. "Now let's not make accusations. Our policies are in place for the safety of everyone. I'm sorry, but Miss Jenkins's decision stands. We can try to rebook you on a later flight, perhaps tomorrow, once we've had time to verify your documents." The offer was another insult, a hollow gesture designed to make them go away. The final boarding call for Flight 88 echoed through the terminal. The gate door was about to close. They had lost. Defeated for the moment, Maya took back their documents. Her eyes met David Chen's, and for a split second, the polished composure of a 17-year-old girl fell away, replaced by the cold, assessing gaze of a future titan. "You will regret this decision," she said. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. Chen gave a dismissive little laugh. "Have a nice day, ladies." He turned and walked away, already putting the incident out of his mind. Maya and Amara stood alone, the roar of their plane's engines taxiing away from the gate filling the silence between them. The humiliation was complete. They had followed the rules, presented their case logically, and were met with a wall of bad faith and bigotry. Amara looked at her sister, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of rage. "Now what, Maya? We're going to miss the opening ceremony." Maya took a deep breath, her own disappointment a sharp pain in her chest. She looked out the vast window, not at the departing Global Wings jet, but at the open sky beyond. "Now," she said, pulling out her phone, "we make a call." She scrolled to a single contact in her phone labeled simply, Dad. She pressed the call button. He answered on the first ring, his deep, calm voice a familiar comfort. Maya, you should be in the air. Is everything okay? Maya took another steadying breath. Dad, she said, her voice clear and strong despite the turmoil inside her. It happened again. We have a code B. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence heavier than any words. A code B was their family's shorthand, a discreet term for situations involving intractable bigotry, for moments when grace and steel were not enough. Dr. Marcus Thorne's voice, when it came back, had lost all its warmth, replaced by something arctic and precise. Understood. Give me your exact location. Terminal gate and the nearest private aviation FBO. Maya relayed the information. JFK, Terminal 4, Gate B24. The nearest FBO is Shelter. Stay exactly where you are, Dr. Thorne commanded. Help is on the way. And Maya? Yes, Dad. Get the name of every employee involved. I want their names. The call ended. Maya looked at Amara, a new light in her eyes. The hurt was still there, but it was now overlaid with a powerful certainty. The game had just changed. The corporate wall they had run into was about to be hit by a wrecking ball. They had no idea who they had just crossed. For the next few minutes, the area around Gate B24 returned to a semblance of normality. The Global Wing staff began preparing for their next flight. Brenda Jenkins wiped down her counter with a disinfectant cloth, a small, satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She had done her job. She had protected the integrity of the flight. In her mind, she was a heroine, a guardian against the unruly and the undeserving. David Chen was back in his office, already forgetting the faces of the two girls he had so casually dismissed. Maya and Amara remained by the window, a silent, watchful island in the stream of travelers. Other passengers shot them curious, pitying glances. The businessman who had been in a hurry was now seated at a nearby gate, shaking his head as he spoke on his phone. Sarah, the student who had filmed the encounter, had quietly sent the video to her older brother, a journalist at a popular online news outlet, with the simple message, "You are not going to believe this." 5 minutes passed, then 7. A new sound began to slice through the ambient noise of the terminal. It was a high-pitched, powerful whine, distinct from the lower-pitched rumble of the commercial airliners. It was the sound of immense power, refined and compressed. Heads began to turn. Ground crew personnel on the tarmac below stopped what they were doing and looked towards the private runways. Even Brenda Jenkins paused, a flicker of annoyance on her face at the disruption. Then it came into view, sleek, impossibly white, with twin engines mounted near a gracefully swept T-tail. A jet was descending with a confident, almost arrogant speed. It wasn't a commercial plane. It was a private marvel of engineering and luxury, a predator among pigeons. The sunlight glinted off its polished fuselage and the two thin, platinum lines that ran its length. Even from a distance, it radiated an aura of untouchable wealth and influence. "What is that?" someone near the window murmured. A pilot waiting for his own flight stood up, his eyes wide. "My God," he breathed. "That's a G700, a Gulfstream G700. The name rippled through the small crowd of onlookers who knew what it meant. The Gulfstream G700 was not just a private jet. It was one of the largest, fastest, and most expensive private jets in the world. It was a flying penthouse, a symbol of a level of wealth that didn't just request things but commanded them. It cost upwards of $75 million. The jet didn't head for the distant private hangars. Instead, following instructions being barked into the ground controller's radios, it taxied with predatory grace across the active tarmac, heading directly for the service area adjacent to Gate B24. This was an almost unheard-of breach of airport protocol. Private aircraft and commercial traffic operated in separate worlds. To bring a private jet to a commercial terminal gate was a move that required a level of clearance that bordered on sovereign power. The G700 came to a halt on the rain-slicked concrete, its engines spooling down with a final expensive sigh. It dwarfed the baggage carts and service vehicles around it. It was a spaceship that had landed in a parking lot. Back inside the terminal, every eye was glued to the spectacle. Brenda Jenkins and David Chen, drawn by the commotion, were now standing by the window, their mouths slightly agape. A moment later, the jet's door opened, and a staircase unfurled with silent hydraulic precision. At the top of the stairs, a woman in a crisp pilot's uniform appeared. She had silver blonde hair cut in a sharp bob and sunglasses that hid her eyes. She surveyed the scene for a moment, then descended the stairs with an air of absolute command. She was met by an airport operations official in a high-visibility vest who was gesturing frantically, clearly protesting this breach of protocol. The pilot, Captain Eva Rostova, simply handed him a tablet. The official looked at it, his face went pale, and he immediately stepped back, speaking urgently into his radio. Whatever was on that screen had overridden his authority completely. Captain Rostova walked towards the terminal entrance, her polished black boots clicking on the tarmac. Another airport official unlocked a service door and escorted her directly into the gate area, bypassing security. She strode through the crowd, which parted for her as if by instinct. Her eyes scanned the area and landed on Maya and Amara. A brief, professional smile touched her lips. "Maya, Amara," she said, her voice having a faint, unplaceable Eastern European accent. "I am Captain Rostova. Your father sent me. Your ride is here." The pieces began to click into place in the minds of the onlookers. The refused boarding, the quiet phone call, and now this. This was not a coincidence. This was a response. Brenda Jenkins watched, her face a mask of disbelief. The smug satisfaction had evaporated, replaced by a dawning, sickening sense of dread. David Chen felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He had dismissed these two girls as a minor annoyance. He was beginning to realize he had just casually kicked a hornet's nest the size of a mountain. "Your luggage?" Captain Rostova asked. "It was checked onto the Global Wings flight," Maya replied, her composure absolute. "It will be retrieved," the captain stated, not as a request, but as a fact. She spoke briefly into a small radio on her lapel. "The Thorn luggage, tags 774A and 774B, are to be removed from the cargo hold of Global Wings Flight 88 immediately and brought to my aircraft. The flight is not to depart until this is done." On the tarmac, the baggage conveyor leading to the Boeing 777, which had been about to push back from the gate, suddenly stopped. A new order had been given. Captain Rostova then turned her attention to the two Global Wings employees. She walked towards Brenda and David, her gaze as cold and clear as ice. "I am Captain Eva Rostova, Chief Pilot for Thorn Industries," she announced, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "You are Brenda Jenkins and you are David Chen." It wasn't a question. "You have, in the last 30 minutes, illegally denied boarding to two passengers, breached your airline's own carriage contract, and committed an act of blatant discrimination. My employer, Dr. Marcus Thorne, is aware of this. Every second of your interaction was recorded by a passenger and is already in his possession. The financial and legal consequences for you personally and for Global Wings Air will be significant." She let the words hang in the air. Then she turned back to the twins. "Let's go. London is waiting." With Captain Rostova leading the way, Maya and Amara walked towards the service door. They didn't look back. They didn't need to. As they stepped out onto the tarmac and ascended the stairs into the waiting Gulfstream, the full weight of the 10-minute turnaround slammed into Brenda Jenkins. She had tried to deny two young black women a seat in first class. In response, their father had sent a $75 million private jet to pick them up from the gate like a limousine. The small crowd of passengers erupted into applause. Someone shouted, "That's how it's done!" Sarah, the student, was still filming, capturing the gobsmacked expressions on Brenda and David's faces, a perfect karmic ending to her viral video. The story was just beginning. The interior of the Gulfstream G700 was less like a plane and more like a luxury apartment in a futuristic skyscraper. The scent of supple leather and polished mahogany replaced the stale, recycled air of the terminal. The cabin was configured with 4 distinct living areas, a club suite with 4 plush swiveling armchairs, a conference and dining area, a media lounge with a massive OLED screen, and a private stateroom with a full-sized bed in the rear. Maya and Amara sank into the creamy leather seats of the club suite. A flight attendant dressed in a discreetly elegant uniform appeared almost magically by their side. Miss Thorne, she said with a warm smile. Can I get you anything before takeoff? A sparkling water, perhaps? Chef has prepared a light brunch menu for the flight. The whiplash from their experience at the gate was staggering. Minutes ago, they were being treated like criminals. Now they were in a world of bespoke comfort, where their every need was anticipated. As the G700's powerful Rolls-Royce engine spooled up with a deep, satisfying hum, Amara finally let out the breath she felt she'd been holding for the last hour. A single tear of anger and relief traced a path down her cheek. Maya reached over and took her sister's hand. "We're okay," she said softly. "I know," Amara replied, wiping the tear away. "It's just the ugliness of it, Maya. The way she looked at us, the way he just dismissed us, as if we were nothing." "They made a mistake," Maya said, her eyes looking out the large oval window as the plane began to taxi. "And Dad will make sure they learn from it." On the other end of a satellite phone in the cockpit, Captain Rostova was speaking in low, measured tones. "Yes, Dr. Thorne. The girls are on board and safe. Yes, the luggage has been transferred. The names are confirmed. Brenda Jenkins, gate agent, and David Chen, station manager. The video file has been received and is being uploaded to the secure server now. Understood. The legal team will have it within the hour. Enjoy your day, sir." She ended the call. Dr. Marcus Thorne was not a man who yelled or made idle threats. He was a chess grandmaster in a world of checkers players. His response would not be loud and immediate. It would be silent, strategic, and utterly devastating. Back in Terminal 4, the shockwaves were just beginning to spread. The video Sarah had filmed, a 4-minute clip titled, "Global Wings Agent Refuses to Let Black Teens Board, You Won't Believe What Happens Next," was already rocketing through the internet. Her journalist brother had packaged it with a compelling headline, and it was picked up by every major news aggregator. The visuals were damning. Brenda's condescending tone, Maya and Amara's calm, logical responses, David Chen's smarmy dismissal, and the jaw-dropping finale, the arrival of the Gulfstream G700. It was a perfect, self-contained drama of injustice and epic comeuppance. Within an hour, #Global Wings Shame was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. The airline's social media accounts were drowning under a tidal wave of outrage. Celebrities, politicians, and everyday people were sharing the video, expressing their disgust. At the Global Wings Air corporate headquarters in Atlanta, the atmosphere was one of sheer panic. The stock, which traded on the NASDAQ, had already taken a noticeable dip in pre-market trading as the story spread through financial news circles. The CEO, a gruff, bottom-line-oriented man named Richard Sterling, was screaming at his PR team in a hastily assembled emergency meeting. "How did this happen? Who the hell are these girls?" he roared, slamming his fist on the mahogany conference table. A terrified junior analyst who had been tasked with finding that out cleared his throat. "Sir, we've identified them. They are Maya and Amara Thorne. Their father is Dr. Marcus Thorne." The name dropped into the room like a 10-ton weight. Richard Sterling's face went white. Dr. Marcus Thorne was not just some rich dad. He was a Silicon Valley legend, the founder and CEO of Nexus AI, a company whose technology powered everything from global logistics networks to advanced medical diagnostics. Nexus AI was a behemoth, a quiet giant whose tentacles reached into nearly every Fortune 500 company. More importantly, Thorne was known for his fierce protection of his family and his unwavering commitment to social justice, often waged through shrewd, strategic financial warfare. And, as another analyst quickly discovered with a sinking feeling in his stomach, Nexus AI had a massive multi-year contract with Global Wings Air, handling their entire global logistics and flight path optimization system. The contract was worth over $300 million annually. "Get Chen and Jenkins on the phone, suspend them, immediately," Sterling ordered, his voice now a strained whisper. "Draft a public apology, full refund, offer them a lifetime of free first-class flights, whatever it takes." But it was already too late. This was no longer about a refund or a free flight. Richard Sterling was trying to use a Band-Aid to fix a wound that was about to require amputation. From 40,000 feet above the Atlantic, Maya and Amara were finalizing their presentation. They ate a meal of poached salmon and fresh greens, the humiliation of the terminal already a memory they were processing and compartmentalizing. They were their father's daughters, after all. They knew that the best response to those who tried to hold them down was to simply soar higher. As they flew east, the sun rising to meet them, the storm they had left behind was just beginning to gather force. The immediate aftermath was over. The true reckoning was about to begin. The first official communication from Thorn Industries to Global Wings Air was not a furious phone call or a threatening letter. It was a single, glacially polite email that arrived in CEO Richard Sterling's personal inbox at 9:01 a.m. Eastern Time. It was from Dr. Thorn's chief counsel. The email stated, in no uncertain terms, that due to a fundamental breach of trust and a demonstrated failure to adhere to basic principles of corporate and social responsibility, Nexus AI was exercising Clause 28B of their contract, the Moral Turpitude Clause. Effective immediately, their $300 million annual contract was suspended pending a full investigation. All Nexus AI integration and support would cease within 48 hours. Sterling felt the blood drain from his face. Clause 28B was a boilerplate section of the contract he'd never paid any attention to. It was legal fluff. No one ever actually invoked it. Losing the Nexus AI system wasn't like losing a catering supplier. It was like a human body suddenly losing its central nervous system. Flight scheduling, crew rostering, fuel optimization, cargo logistics, even their frequent flyer program. Everything was managed by Thorn's intricate AI. Ripping it out would cripple their global operations within days and would cost billions to replace. Panic turned to pure terror. This was an existential threat. Meanwhile, the personal unraveling of Brenda Jenkins and David Chen was happening in real time. Both had been summarily suspended without pay via a frantic call from corporate HR. They were ordered not to speak to the media and to await further instructions. Brenda sat in her small, tidy condo, the television blaring. Her face was on every news channel. Commentators were dissecting her every word, every sneer. Her carefully constructed world, where she was a figure of authority and respect, had been demolished. Her full name, her approximate age, and her 2 decades of service with the airline were now public knowledge. Online sleuths had already found her social media profiles, and they were being flooded with a torrent of vitriol. Friends and neighbors were texting her, asking if that was really her in the video. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on her, suffocating her. David Chen's situation was different, but no less dire. As a manager, he was seen as the embodiment of the airline's failure. His attempt to protect his employee was being spun as a cowardly and complicit act of corporate racism. His LinkedIn profile was being bombarded. He tried to explain to his wife what had happened, but the words came out as a pathetic jumble of excuses. "I had to back my employee. I didn't know who they were. It was a judgment call." His wife just stared at him, the respect she once had for him visibly eroding. Dr. Thorn's strategy was multi-pronged. The contract suspension was the first, most direct blow. The second was more subtle. He made 2 phone calls. The first was to Eleanor Vance, the powerful head of the CalPERS Investment Fund, one of the largest pension funds in the world, and a major institutional investor in Global Wings Air. He didn't tell her to sell. He didn't have to. He simply explained, as a concerned fellow investor, what had happened to his daughters and mentioned that he was liquidating all his personal and corporate holdings in the airline, as he could no longer, in good conscience, support a company with such a toxic and unpredictable corporate culture. The second call was to a senator on the powerful Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. He calmly detailed the event and suggested that perhaps the committee might want to investigate whether Global Wings Air's policies were in compliance with federal anti-discrimination laws. The senator, who was facing a tough re-election and saw a golden opportunity for a high-profile, righteous cause, enthusiastically agreed. By noon, the fallout was a raging inferno. The news of the Nexus AI contract suspension leaked to the Wall Street Journal. Global Wings Air's stock, which had been dipping, now plunged off a cliff. It fell 15% in an hour, wiping out over $1.2 billion in market capitalization. Eleanor Vance, taking Thorne's advice, began quietly selling off CalPER's massive block of shares, adding fuel to the fire. The story was no longer just about two teenagers and a rude airline employee. It was now a case study in corporate liability, a story about the staggering financial consequences of unchecked prejudice. At their headquarters, the Global Wings Board of Directors convened an emergency video conference. Richard Sterling, looking pale and haggard, tried to assure them he had the situation under control. "We've fired the two employees involved," he announced, a desperate tremor in his voice. "We've issued a public apology and are trying to get in touch with Dr. Thorne to offer a personal one." An elderly, formidable woman on the board who had built her fortune in manufacturing cut him off. "Trying to get in touch? Richard, did you really think this was about an apology? Marcus Thorne isn't an angry customer. He's a corporate raider who uses morality as his weapon. He isn't seeking an apology. He's seeking annihilation." The stark, cold truth of her words silenced the entire board. They hadn't just angered a wealthy father. They had provoked a man who could dismantle their company piece by piece, all without ever raising his voice. And he would do it with the full, roaring support of the public behind him. The unraveling was swift and brutal. Global Wings Air was no longer just dealing with a PR crisis. It was fighting for its very survival. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in strategic destruction. Dr. Marcus Thorne operated not with the blunt force of anger, but with the surgical precision of a master strategist. Every move was calculated to inflict maximum damage and expose the deep systemic rot within Global Wings Air. The first domino to fall after the stock plunge was the operational chaos. As promised, at the 48-hour mark, the Nexus AI system went dark for Global Wings. The airline attempted to switch to their antiquated backup system, a patchwork of outdated software they hadn't properly maintained in years. It was like trying to replace a modern supercomputer with an abacus. The result was immediate and catastrophic. Flights were delayed, then canceled by the hundreds. Crew scheduling fell apart, leaving pilots and flight attendants stranded in the wrong cities. Cargo shipments were lost. The automated booking system crashed, leaving thousands of passengers unable to check in or change their flights. Airports around the world descended into chaos as Global Wings gates became focal points of passenger fury. The cost of the disruption was bleeding them of millions of dollars per hour. Next, the legal assault began. Thorne didn't file a simple discrimination lawsuit. He orchestrated a multi-front legal war. His corporate legal team filed a massive lawsuit for breach of contract, citing the airline's failure to provide safe and non-discriminatory passage for his minor children, who were traveling as representatives of his company. The damages they sought were not just for the cost of the tickets, but for reputational damage to his daughters and their innovative project, pegged at an astronomical 9-figure sum. Simultaneously, he funded a class-action lawsuit, fronted by a renowned civil rights attorney. They put out a call for anyone who had ever felt discriminated against by Global Wings Air. The response was overwhelming. Within 2 days, thousands of stories poured in from people of color, travelers with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQ+ community, all detailing similar experiences of humiliation and dismissal at the hands of the airline staff. The narrative was now set in stone. The Thorne sisters' experience was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a diseased corporate culture. Then came the political pressure. The Senate hearing was scheduled. Richard Sterling was subpoenaed to testify before Congress. The FAA, under pressure from the committee, announced a top-to-bottom investigation into Global Wing's training protocols and their history of customer complaints, threatening them with massive fines and potentially the suspension of key operational licenses. The corporate partners began to flee. A major credit card company, which co-branded a popular travel rewards card with the airline, announced it was severing ties, citing the need to protect its brand from the toxic association. Major corporations began pulling their corporate travel accounts, unwilling to have their employees fly on an airline that was now synonymous with bigotry. The exodus was a death by 1,000 cuts. Richard Sterling was a man adrift in a hurricane. His desperate attempts to contact Dr. Thorne were met with a wall of silence. His calls went to voicemail. His emails were answered by lawyers. He made a televised, groveling apology, but it came across as insincere and self-serving. He announced mandatory company-wide diversity and sensitivity training, but it was seen as too little, far too late. Brenda Jenkins and David Chen were the footnotes in this epic corporate collapse. They were formally fired, their careers in the airline industry effectively over. They became pariahs. Brenda couldn't leave her condo without facing the scorn of her neighbors. Her photo was everywhere. She was the face of the scandal, a cautionary tale of petty prejudice with world-altering consequences. David Chen found himself unemployable, his name and face forever linked to the viral video. His managerial weakness had cost him everything. Their lives were ruined, not by Dr. Thorne's direct action, but by the firestorm he had unleashed. They were simply the kindling he had used to start the blaze. In London, Maya and Amara delivered their keynote address to a standing ovation. They spoke with passion and brilliance about their water purification system, about the future of technology, and about the power of innovation to solve the world's problems. They never once mentioned the incident at the airport. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. Their grace and intelligence in the face of ugliness had become part of their story, amplifying their message. They weren't just brilliant young scientists. They were symbols of resilience. After their speech, a reporter asked them if they had any comment on the situation with Global Wings Air. Maya smiled, a calm, confident expression on her face. "My sister and I are focused on the future and the positive change we can create. As for the airline, my father is handling that. He is a great believer in accountability." That single word, accountability, was a chilling final verdict. This wasn't about revenge. It was about a fundamental rebalancing of the scales. Dr. Thorne was not just tearing down a company. He was methodically dissecting it, exposing its failures to the world, and ensuring that the consequences were inescapable. He was demonstrating on a global stage the true cost of looking at two brilliant young women and seeing nothing but a profile. 1 week felt like a lifetime at the beleaguered headquarters of Global Wings Air. The resignation of CEO Richard Sterling had done nothing to stop the hemorrhaging. The company was in a state of corporate freefall, a multi-billion-dollar titan brought to its knees by the quiet, calculated fury of one man. The stock, now suspended from trading after a catastrophic 40% plunge, was essentially worthless paper. The operational chaos caused by the Nexus AI system's absence had grounded over half their global fleet. Every news channel played a repeating loop of angry passengers stranded in terminals from Sydney to Chicago, with the viral video of Brenda Jenkins and the Thorne sisters serving as the constant damning backdrop. The company wasn't just losing money, it was losing its right to exist. Into this maelstrom stepped Caroline Jennings, a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a reputation as the industry's most effective fixer. She was appointed interim CEO by a terrified board. Her job was not to rebuild, but to triage. Her first and perhaps last act as CEO would be to approach Dr. Marcus Thorne and beg for terms. The board had given her a chillingly simple mandate during a panicked late-night call. "Whatever he wants, Caroline, give it to him. There is no price too high to avoid liquidation." She was not a negotiator. She was a supplicant, sent to receive the terms of surrender. A meeting was granted. The location itself was a power play, not a neutral law office or a corporate boardroom, but the sun-drenched glass and steel atrium of the Thorn Foundation in San Francisco. It was a space filled with art, light, and the quiet hum of progress, a world away from the stale, fear-choked air of the Global Wings C-suite. As Caroline and two ashen-faced board members were escorted through the building, they passed exhibits showcasing the Foundation's work, advancements in pediatric medicine, clean energy initiatives, and educational programs. They were being deliberately reminded that they were not dealing with a rival corporation, but with a man whose primary business was shaping a better future. They were shown into a minimalist conference room with a single, massive window offering a panoramic view of the Golden Gate Bridge. They sat and waited in unnerving silence for precisely 7 minutes. When Dr. Marcus Thorne entered, he was alone. Dressed in a simple dark sweater and trousers, he moved with the unhurried grace of a predator. He offered no handshake, no pleasantries. He simply took his seat at the head of the long oak table, his gaze sweeping over them, his expression a calm, unreadable mask. "Miss Jennings," he began, his voice a low, resonant baritone that filled the room. "The last time my children were in a room with representatives of your company, they were treated with contempt. I trust this meeting will be more productive." Caroline swallowed, her carefully prepared opening remarks suddenly feeling flimsy. "Dr. Thorne, on behalf of every employee and board member of Global Wings Air, I want to offer our deepest, most profound, and unreserved apology for the abhorrent treatment of your daughters. It was a failure on every level, personal, professional, and moral. The employees involved have been terminated. We have begun a company-wide review. We are—" He raised a single hand, a gesture of finality that stopped her mid-sentence. He let the silence stretch for a moment, his eyes fixed on hers. "An apology," he said, the words precise and cold, "is the customary response to a mistake. What happened to Maya and Amara was not a mistake. It was a predictable systemic outcome. Do you know," he continued, leaning forward slightly, "that according to the Department of Transportation's own data, your airline has a 34% higher rate of discrimination-based complaints from black passengers than the industry average? Your company doesn't have a Brenda Jenkins problem, Miss Jennings. Your company has a culture problem. Your apology is for the symptom. I am here to address the disease." He had done his homework. He had data. He had turned their corporate negligence into an empirical fact. Caroline felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was worse than she had imagined. "So, let us dispense with the hollow theater of corporate contrition," Dr. Thorne stated. "You are not here to apologize. You are here because your company is bleeding out, and you believe I hold the tourniquet. You are correct. But my price for stopping the bleeding is not financial restitution. My price is transformation." He slid a sleek dark gray folder across the table. It stopped perfectly in front of Caroline. It wasn't thick. The brevity was more intimidating than a phone book-sized list of demands. "My terms are not negotiable," he said. With trembling hands, Caroline opened the folder. The first page was titled, "The Justice and Dignity Fund." "First," Thorne explained, as if narrating a verdict, "Global Wings Air will capitalize a trust fund with an initial immediate payment of $200 million. This fund will not be administered by you or by me. It will be managed by the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Its sole purpose will be to compensate any individual who has a credible claim of discrimination against any airline, and to fund aggressive litigation to challenge discriminatory practices across the entire travel industry. My daughters had me. This fund will be for everyone who does not." Caroline's eyes widened. He wasn't just punishing them. He was forcing them to bankroll the very activists who would hold their entire industry's feet to the fire for decades to come. "Second," he continued, gesturing to the next page, "accountability is set at the top. Your board has demonstrated a profound blindness to the culture it oversees. Therefore, you will cede 2 seats on your board of directors, in perpetuity, to appointees selected by the Thorne Foundation. The first will be a leading constitutional law professor who specializes in civil rights. The second will be a distinguished sociologist whose life's work is the study of systemic bias. Your company will be given new eyes. You will learn to see what you have for so long chosen to ignore. This was an unprecedented corporate invasion. He was embedding his ideology directly into their governance, a permanent, watchful presence in their most powerful chamber. Third, he went on, his voice unwavering, you will scrap every diversity, sensitivity, and customer service training program you currently have. They are performative failures. You will replace them with a new curriculum, the Thorn Standard, which will be designed by my hand-picked team of experts. Every single one of your 70,000 employees, from the baggage handlers in the cargo hold to you, Miss Jennings, will be required to pass a rigorous certification course under this new standard. Failure to pass will be grounds for immediate termination. Your airline will become the gold standard for equitable service, whether it wants to or not. The final page was the one Caroline dreaded most. It was titled, Partnership and Penance. And finally, Dr. Thorne said, a glint of steel in his eyes, the Nexus AI contract. It will be reinstated. The operational chaos will end. However, the new licensing fee will be double the original rate, $600 million per year. One of the board members let out an audible gasp. Dr. Thorne, with all due respect, that is punitive. We are on the brink of insolvency. An additional $300 million expenditure will... It is not a penalty. Thorne cut him off, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. It is an investment in your redemption. The additional $300 million will not come to my company. It will be paid annually and directly into a new charitable foundation I am announcing today. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bridge. Your gate agent looked at two of the world's most promising young minds and saw a threat, a problem, a profile that didn't belong. Your company will now pay to create a world where that can never happen again. This money will fund the Thorne Initiative for Equitable Skies. It will provide full STEM scholarships, mentorships, and leadership training for thousands of underprivileged young women of color every single year. Your company will, from this day forward, actively pay to cultivate the brilliant minds that your culture sought to diminish. It is a tax on your institutional ignorance, Miss Jennings, and the revenue it generates will be enlightenment. He turned back to face them. You will not just be a client. You will be our founding partner. Your logo will be on every scholarship award. Your penance will be to publicly champion the very people you privately scorned. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of his plan left them speechless. He wasn't just demanding money or control. He was demanding a soul. He was hijacking their entire corporate identity and rebranding them as an engine of social justice, powered by the profits of their own past sins. It was a checkmate of staggering genius. Caroline Jennings closed the folder. She looked at the two board members who stared back at her, their faces a mixture of horror and awe. She knew what she had to do. There was no other path. We accept your terms, she said, her voice a near whisper. 2 weeks later, the world's media gathered for a press conference on a stage in front of the Thorne Foundation. Dr. Thorne stood at the podium, flanked by Maya and Amara. Caroline Jennings and the new Global Wings board stood behind them, a visible symbol of their submission and partnership. Dr. Thorne spoke not of anger or revenge, but of opportunity and responsibility. He announced the fund, the new board appointments, the training standard, and finally, the Thorne Initiative for Equitable Skies. He then turned the podium over to his daughters. Maya spoke first, her voice clear and strong. Excellence is colorblind. Innovation knows no gender. The only barrier to progress is a failure of imagination. We look forward to meeting the first class of Thorne scholars and seeing the futures they will build. Amara followed, her words resonating with a quiet power. What happened to us was meant to make us feel small, but thanks to our Father and this new commitment, it has become the catalyst for something bigger than any of us. A door was closed to us. So, we've decided to build 1,000 new ones, for everyone. The karma that had come for Global Wings Air was not a simple destructive force. It was a creative one. The company was saved from bankruptcy, but its old self was dead and buried. It was reborn, shackled to a purpose it would never have chosen, but could now never escape. The final reckoning was not an ending, but a new and far more just beginning. Brenda Jenkins had tried to deny 2 girls their seats. In response, their father had made sure that thousands more like them would one day own the entire plane. This wasn't just a story about a private jet and a satisfying takedown. It was a story about dignity. It was about the quiet, insidious nature of everyday prejudice and the extraordinary power of fighting back not just with anger, but with intelligence, strategy, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Maya and Amara's story is a powerful reminder that ignorance, when challenged by brilliance and resolve, will always lose. The actions of one gate agent set off a chain reaction that didn't just punish a corporation, but forced it to become an agent for the very change it resisted. If this story of justice and accountability moved you, please help us share it with the world. Hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with your friends and family, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true-life dramas that matter. And we want to hear from you. What would you have done in the twins' situation? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.